Hello, beautiful people. I wanted to talk to you about the Brazil baby affair. It is something that has to do with my personal traffic story, and although it is about the past, there are enough implications and there's enough evidence and suspicion and whatnot to believe that after uh, this, it's illegal adoption via and from Brazil uh, continued. So let's get started. I want to start off with a little short thing. I usually do not use AI mode, but um, for this I did because just out of curiosity, and I'm glad I did it because the things came up I did not know, and so yeah, so I did use it. So, what is the Brazil baby affair? The Brazil baby affair refers to a massive, highly organized baby trafficking network that peaked during the 1980s. Led primarily by a notorious ringleader named Arlete Hilu, the network illegally sent thousands of Brazilian babies to wealthy families abroad, most notably in Israel, Europe, and the United States. The timeline of how this network um, formed, operated, and was ultimately dismantled includes 1970s. The market emerges. Military dictatorship era. Brazil was ruled by a military regime until 1985. The state offered almost no support to poor, single, or vulnerable pregnant women. Now, this is something that is used a lot, and it is true. But like in the Netherlands, for example, this example is being used to make it seem like that was the biggest cause that the child trafficking business could grow so out of hand as at that time, and that is not true. It's one of the things, and there are many other things. Um, Rise in global demand, a growing demand for international adoption, coincided with incredibly strict official adoption laws in Brazil. This bottleneck created a massive black market. Lawyers and local brokers began scouting for babies. Early 1980s, the network solidifies. 1983, enter Arlette Hilu. A former judicial clerk named Arlette Hilu built a highly organized child trafficking pipeline. And this is something many people don't want to talk about, that the law is so deeply involved in child trafficking, but it's logic because you need to falsify all kinds of documents, and you can't do that without people who have a lot of knowledge about the law and know how to do that. So, yeah. Operating heavily out of states like Paraná and Santa Catarina, her network specialized in targeted deception. Um, I must say that my former parents had also houses. In the places named here, Santa Catarina is a state, and like Paraná, and there were different kinds of child trafficking hubs very actively there, where they also had houses, and I'll come to back to it later. The tactics: the ring targeted poor mothers. In many cases, hospital staff told mothers their newborn had died during childbirth. In other cases, mothers were tricked into signing blank documents or giving up temporary custody. The payouts: foreign couples traveled to Brazil and paid anywhere from $8,000 to over $10,000 per child, which was a massive fortune at that time. The network bypassed legal cues by falsely registering the babies as the biological children of the foreign couples. So, like when you come at the border with two very Dutch white persons, with me as a newborn biological child that should have raised many questions and maybe some other things, but none of that ever happened. Mid to late 1980s, raids, scandals, and arrests. 1985 till 1986, police cracking down. As hundreds of babies mysteriously left southern Brazilian airports with foreign couples, federal police launched major investigation. Raids uncovered secret clandestine nurseries where babies were kept hidden until they could be flown out. 1986, Hilu's arrest. Arlette Hilu was arrested in Israel after fleeing Brazil. She was extradited back to Brazil to face charges of child trafficking, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Now, back to the former point where we have the clandestine nurseries where babies were kept hidden until they could be flown out. My former Dutch parents had different houses, like I said, and there were places where the little children, babies, could stay until the paperwork was done. So the fraudulent paperwork was made, and the then new parents could bring them to rural Bruna, who had been kidnapped from her home in southern Brazil and sold to an Israeli family, was successfully tracked down and returned to her biological parents. It was the first time an illegally adopted Brazilian child was repatriated. 1990s, structural reform. 1990, creation of the ECA. Outraged by the systemic trafficking exposed by the Brazil baby affair, the the Brazilian government enacted the statute of the child and adolescent, ECA. This landmark law overhauled child protection and heavily restricted international adoptions. That was in 1990, and we have enough examples of after that this way of illegal adoption, child trafficking still was happening. 1992, the Hague Convention. Brazil signed the Hague Adoption Convention, ratified in 1999 to establish strict, traceable, and legal global adoption standards to ensure baby trafficking networks could not operate so easily again. Yeah, like so many other things in this system that failed. 1992, the Hague Convention. Brazil signed the Hague. Oh yeah, that's all. I already did that. 2010 to present, the fight for the truth. 2015, launch of the NGO. Adult adoptees who realized they were victims of this illegal network formed the NGO Brazil Baby Affair. The group works to help stolen children who are now adults track down their biological families in Brazil, which is very difficult, as I may add. There is another thing. Uh, um, the Hague Convention is people don't very often understand that in the correct way, but it is a legalization of child trafficking. So every country who signed this agreement, all their governments are in it. So, and there are over 60 countries who signed this. 2018-2021, European investigations. European governments faced mounting pressure to answer for their past negligence. For example, the Dutch government launched a formal committee to investigate how its own officials allowed these illegal Brazilian adoptions to slip through the system decades prior. International brokers and couriers. The network extended far beyond Brazil's borders, utilizing logistics handlers to manage the international side of the trade. Yes, that's when I was very deeply in this investigation. I came to the same conclusion. Brazil had made a blueprint of how they could do this, and so they also got children from over the borders to do the same with, and in the same way. Colombia, Peru, Guatemala. So, yeah. Uh, and then there's another thing, because we're talking about how the networks work, but there's a lot of talk about private influence in these networks, and so it seems divided, and that it's something on its own. But those private networks are part of the whole system. It was meant to distract. Foreign intermediaries or brokers operation in destination countries, most notably Israel, the Netherlands, and Germany, advertised adoption services to wealthy couples. They coordinated travel, arranged hotel stays in Brazil, and handed over the cash payments, which often exceeded $10,000 per baby. Baby couriers. The network employed couriers who were paid to physically transport infants across international borders using forged transit papers and fake passports before handing them over to the adoptive parents. And like I said in my example from my investigation, there was the churches were heavily involved from the former Dutch, for example, Dutch colonies there. And Deaconess sisters were driving around in their vans, in their VW vans, with these kinds of babies and little children. The downfall and legacy. When the network was dismantled in the late 1980s, Hilu and several of her primary associates were arrested and imprisoned. Hilu herself faced multiple convictions for child trafficking, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. After spending years in prison and living her life in obscurity, Hilu passed away in a nursing home in Sao Paulo at the age of 78. Today, organizations like the NGO Brazil Baby Affair, founded by adult victims of this very network, continue to dig through old court records and forged birth certificates to uncover the specific identities of the local brokers who signed off on their stolen identities. Dutch, the Dutch families were investigated in this investigation, in this which was called Brazil Baby Affair. The investigations into these families revealed several critical details. Widespread confessions of illegal practices. During the police raids and interrogations, dozens of Dutch adoptive parents confessed to committing crimes to secure their children. The investigation revealed that many Dutch couples knowingly participated in illegal setups. They traveled to Brazil, took custody of newborns from criminal brokers, and used forged paperwork to register the infants as their own biological children born while traveling abroad. Well, so like I explained, my former Dutch parents had houses in those child trafficking hubs, and they were used as places where those children and babies could stay until the paperwork was finished, and then go to the land of the new parents. A sample of 40 court cases. The initial criminal investigation focused deeply on a sample group of about 40 children and their adoptive families. While prosecutors definitely proved that these adoptions were completely illegal and built on identity fraud, the Dutch government ultimately allowed the children to stay with the Dutch families. This story is in reality a little bit different. All of those families involved got a letter forehand, and at forehand, and which stated there would be no legal consequences for them, and they could keep everybody could keep the children. And the head of police of the Netherlands of that time, that was shortly before this investigation changed as well. That was Mr. Demming, and Mr. Demming is accused of a lot of ugly stuff, like pedophile accusations and um, abuse of children, sexual abuse of children, and all kinds of things in that direction. So it's very yeah, it's very remarkable that he was assigned to do this. And let me get this very clear: this investigation was for the public, because those people involved were already informed that they would face no legal consequences, and nothing would happen. So the Ministry of Justice and the judiciary decided not to remove the children from their adoptive homes due to massiveness of the phenomenon and the extreme emotional distress it would cause the families. The families, not us, the families, and the massiveness of the phenomenon. So they picked 40 cases out of thousands. So they kept it very small. And in the Netherlands, they say there were 100 Brazilian children, around about 100, that were illegally adopted in that way. There are many more. And if we see this in the countries named here, Israel, Germany, the Netherlands, United States, I think we can say it's thousands. The crime of child laundering. By letting the adoption stand, the Dutch legal system inadvertently allowed what future state commission called child laundering. Children who were stolen, bought, or obtained through coercion under suspect circumstances in Brazil were legally transformed into legitimate recognizable citizens inside Dutch family homes. The generational fallout. While the adoptive parents avoided having their children taken away in the 1980s, the legal consequences resurfaced decades later. As those babies grew into adults, many realized their birth certificates were fake and that their adoptive parents had intentionally deprived them of their true identities. This culminated in landmark legal actions, such as the case of Patrick Noordhoven. He sued the Dutch state because prosecutors in the 1980s proved his adoption was illegal. Um, but shelved the files and did not do anything to help him or the other 40 children find their real biological families in Brazil. In 2021, the Hague District Court ruled against the Dutch state for violating human rights by failing to protect these children's right to their true heritage. Then I asked AI mode, are there more names made public of people who were part of the network? Yes, through police investigations, court trials, and the historical records compiled by the NGO Brazil Baby Affair, several names of specific intermediaries, witnesses, and international handlers have been made public. While Arlette Hilu remains the central figure convicted of running the pipeline, court documents and solved cases have exposed other individuals who actively facilitated the illegal transfers of babies. International intermediaries and brokers. These individuals acted as the crucial link between the criminal network in Brazil and families in Europe. They arranged the placement of the children, handled finances, or coordinated the local logistics to bypass legal channels. These names are Hermanus Theodorus of Wolkenveld, Johann Jacob Bos, Nelly Bertels Berini, Johannes Cornelis Maria Martin, Katinka van Heerde. Local Brazilian handlers and fixers. These individuals work directly on the ground in Brazil to manage the babies, coordinate the falsification of paperwork, or guide foreign couples through the local registry offices. Dalva Mlaker, Aurora Barbosa. Falsified legal witnesses. In many cases, the network utilized specific individuals who repeatedly signed fraudulent birth declarations at local civil registries. For example, in the landmark of the case of Patrick Noordhoven, court records show the following individual signed off on his completely fabricated birth registration in Sao Paulo. Erika Hanshin Vidal, Valdomiro Ribeiro. Many names of the public officials involved, such as specific judges, hospital clerks, and Dutch consular staff stationed in Brazil, for example, Curitiba, who took bribes or ignored the trafficking, remain heavily protected or redacted in official archives due to strict European and Brazilian privacy laws. However, adult survivors are continuing to petition courts to unseal the full, unredacted investigatory files from the 1980s to identify the remaining players. Then I asked the AI, were there any Dutch people prosecuted during the Brazil baby affair? No. Almost no Dutch citizens were prosecuted or punished during the Brazil baby affair. While the Dutch Public Prosecutor's Office launched a massive nationwide criminal investigation between 1981 and 1984 into 42 adoptive couples suspected of illegal adoptions, my former parents were one of those, the state chose not to press charges or pursue prosecutions. The lack of legal prosecution for Dutch citizens stems from several political and systemic reasons. One, intentional shelved files. When the Dutch police and prosecutors wrapped up their investigation in 1984, they officially proved that these adoptions were completely illegal and relied on identity fraud. However, instead of taking the families to court, the Dutch Ministry of Justice decided to shelve the files. The government feared that prosecuting the parents would create mass public panic and distress for the children involved. Okay. 2. Forgiveness over punishment. The Dutch legal system essentially prioritized the interests of the child to remain in their new homes over punishing the parents for the crime of buying babies or falsifying birth registries. Because the state chose to look the other way, the adoptive parents faced zero criminal penalties, fines, or jail time, even though their actions constituted a punishable offense in the Netherlands. Diplomatic immunity and cover-ups. The investigation revealed that official Dutch diplomats and consular staff stationed in Brazil actively assisted the network by ordering lawyers to draft fraudulent paperwork and ignoring the trafficking schemes. Because these individuals were working for the state, the Dutch government actively covered up their involvement to avoid an international diplomatic scandal with Brazil, protecting its own workers from prosecution. The reversal, the state becomes the accused. Decades later, the legal tables completely turned because the Dutch state refused to prosecute the network of the families in the 1980s, adult survivors were left with completely falsified biological identities. In landmark lawsuits, such as the case of survivor Patrick Noordover, the Dutch state itself was taken to court. In 2021, the district court in The Hague ruled that by failing to prosecute a crime ring and shelving the files, the Dutch government directly violated human rights by denying these stolen children the right to know who their real parents were. If I may add something here, Patrick, I know him personally. He is, this sounds like really winning, and oh, this is a great story, but there are many others like us, also from different countries, and a whole different story. We'll come to it in another video, but this is sketched a little bit more beautiful than it is in reality, and we still don't have the information from those shelved files. So yeah. Then I said to AI, I would like to know more about the 1981 till 1984 police investigation findings. And this came out. The nationwide Dutch police investigation, which ran from December 1981 to March 1984, was launched by the Public Prosecutor's Office. It explicitly looked into how South American infants, primarily from Brazil and Colombia, were being funneled into the Netherlands. The core findings of that investigation exposed a deeply compromised system. Proof of widespread biological fraud. The police definitely proved that the network relied on a specific illegal tactic. And while the police report detailed massive fraud by local brokers and adoptive parents, a crucial truth was intentionally wiped from the final 1984 records. Decades later, a Dutch state commission discovered that the role of Dutch diplomats was intentionally deleted from the 1984 police report. The original findings showed that embassy and consular staff stationed in Brazil knew about the biological registration scams and actively helped facilitate them. Wait. Yeah. Okay. Yes, and actively help facilitate them. Sorry, but the Ministry of Justice covered it up to prevent an international crisis. The investigation uncovered that the babies were not orphans. The network systematically pressured impoverished Brazilian mothers engaged in widespread corruption of local officials and treated the infants as commodities to be bought and sold. Even though the police handed over airtight proof that a major international crime was in place, the Dutch Ministry of Justice prejudged the outcome. Alarmed by how widespread the practice was, the government decided it was too messy to fix. They chose not to remove the children and not to prosecute the parents, effectively shelving the files and leaving the stolen children stranded with the fake identities for decades. So, yeah, those are the facts of my story, of how it all began. And it is, to me, still a very strange idea that there's talk about, like I said, different kinds of stories, but it's all about the same thing, and it's one network, and it was the small private people were part of the network, but that story was brought in as a diversion and really worked very well. Then there was an investigation that was only for the public, because the outcome was already known, with a new head of police, which is very questionable person. And later, right, not long after this whole mess, he got he was the highest boss of the Ministry of Justice. So yeah, I guess that is how the world work works. Yeah, this system is so corrupted that I feel very sorry for people who still have their trust in it, because it's not the way it is. It's not working. So that is it. That was my video about the Brazil baby affair. I hope to see you all later. I'll come up with more findings. I have found some other new things I didn't know about in Brazil at that time, and um, I'm sure that it's not only in Brazil and that it's still happening. So see you all later, and for now, ciao ciao, bye bye.